Welcome to Audio Products Podcast. We are meeting with pro audio industry veterans, founders, product managers, UX designers, to learn how they build and manage the products we all love. You will get tips how to navigate your career in audio and how to develop a successful audio product. From musical instruments through audio plugins and gaming middleware up to music distribution platforms or consumer electronics like headphones, mics, and even automotive speaker systems. Enjoy. Hey, Gösta. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Wojtek.
I'm super happy again to be around. And I mean, that's great because today we are having another meetup, so we did it.
Back in Berlin,
exactly. This time almost for a week. But to our listeners, I would like to, welcome you to this episode. This is first time episode shot in real, in person, not online, as all other episodes. And today I have this pleasure to introduce to you Gösta Wellmer, my friend, who has been helping or building this community together with me, almost from day one. So that's why it's so great that the first in-person episode is actually with Gösta. So Gösta, thanks for, I don't know, to accept the invitation because it's really like us doing this together all the time, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, great that we have the chance to chat. I follow your videos and activities since a while and was really excited to help and follow how you unravel the knowledge in our community.
Yeah, well, that's how to say that. I feel very privileged because all these conversations actually, with all the friends, our friends, it's just everybody is so humble and so happy to share. So in this digital era, when everybody is disconnected, it's so great, to actually have real relations and talk to people who are, willing to help others and simply be connected and share passions for music and generally for art, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's a special quality of the music instrument industry. I think a lot of people are in it because they have the passion and love for connecting through art, events, shared experiences.
Exactly. But today we don't want to brag about the community, but I would like to pick your brain because let's be honest, you have amazing experience yourself, right? And quite a long career in the musical instruments industry, so it would be great if you share with the listeners a little bit about your career path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to do so.
Okay. So can we maybe traditionally start, but if you could just tell a little bit about yourself,
About myself, I'm basically grown up in Berlin. No born Berliner as many people. But in 1986, my family came from East Germany to West Berlin. Mm-hmm. So I would say that was a very forming experience, basically going from one state into a different one. And there were a lot of early experiences I made and that kind of burned into my experience, like in East Germany, the school lettering that you learn as a pupil, and I was there first grade, beginning of second grade. Mm-hmm. The letters were slightly different than in West Germany. There was a different development after Second World War.
Okay.
So one of the things I basically try to do to fit in is, learn letters again, get rid of my Saxonian accent and kind of this idea of, that society is something constructed and that there can be a friction. Okay. Basically entered into my life very early, then also going to school with pupils, coming from Yugoslavia, Turkey, Kurdish people, East Bloc kids, Poland, Russia, and basically being myself a kid that made this transition from one society to another. And I would say that's quite forming growing up in Berlin. You have the great opportunity. There's so many people come here. Berlin was already a center of Europe in the 20s, and after the wall came down, again, it became really the center for culture and basically attracting all kinds of creative people. And I used the opportunity to study in Berlin, studied graphic design. And back then it was not the bachelor-master credit system where you're basically quite, let's say, micromanaged. But back then, when you studied in one university, you could visit courses in all universities.
Oh, okay.
And so I went to the Humboldt University studying about aesthetics. I went to the University of the Arts, learned programming, Max MSP, went to the Hans Eisler School of Music, learned about social philosophy and cultural management. And in Weißensee, my core university, learned visual communication, all the basics. And the school was is structured in the fundamental years after the Bauhaus system. So I learned also basically every discipline work together. So basically in this like first forming year, where you make all your friends throughout your study time, basically they came from, they learned sculpturing, painting, industrial design.
Gotcha.
So I didn't have only the connection to this graphic design and one discipline, but basically tried to suck in as much knowledge as possible.
It's interesting. You see, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to, it's just funny you say that because I used to teach design thinking in the past, and I always, when I wanted to, people to grasp the entire idea of these diverse themes, I say design thinking actually started in Germany in 20s when you had Bauhaus design, where different people from different backgrounds, they were just working together.
Very true.
And there's so many different perspectives that can, gives very not usual, to say, more like a out-of-box ideas, right?
Yes. I mean, I think it's important because when you go onto a certain direction, you will learn certain vocabulary, certain language. Every discipline has its own values. And I think a good thing is when you get exposed early to these different views, you also understand that there's much more than what you know. And I think it also teaches you to be curious, and not to be curious just to observe. No, but curiosity is a way to, explore world and
totally. Yeah. But back. I just interrupted. So this is where because I'm just super curious where, did you make music at the time already, or this is just through university where you got exposed to, you mentioned already Max MSP, etc. So how did you become a designer in the music industry?
I mean, I had a very good friend already in school times. So I was like 19 years old. And he my friend was interested in filming and in music. So we bought his first guitar. And another school friend gave him a keyboard, which was an Ovation bass station.
Okay.
And we got this thing in his place and tried it out. And my first experience with the synthesizer with this bass station was that I turned some knobs to see how it sounds, and suddenly there was silence. And if you know the bass station, it has a switch to access the second envelope. So I turned the amp envelope super long.
Okay.
Didn't know what an envelope is. So at some point this machine was quiet and we couldn't get it back. That was my first experience.
Okay.
And the second experience was actually the turntable of my dad and the records he had. And we basically started DJing in a 60s bar in Kreuzberg.
Okay.
Buying records on the flea markets, and it got us into DJing. And over the DJing, somehow we came also into the music making. And so during the whole study time, I organized for 7-8 years parties, which was basically once a month a concert by IDM artists touring the world, Japanese artists, American artists, and also playing live. My first gear was 2 function generators we bought secondhand and connected to Korg Electribe, the first drum synth version.
Okay.
basically doing live techno.
I got it. I know we did it too in Katowice. That's true. Yeah, so I know. Yeah, excellent. So so how, then I understand that you for a long time were first this designer, later actually become head of design and Native Instruments, right?
Yes, basically, I got totally into, electronic instruments and wrote my diploma already about the design of the synthesizer and tried to explore why does it look as it looks.
Wow.
Following a little bit the technical history and analyzing advertisements for all the synthesizers over the time. And after studying, I was like, okay, what should I do now? And I couldn't see me in any, design agency, no way.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I came across an internship position at Native Instruments. And in 2006 started to be an intern, putting in the bitmaps for Battery 3. And then basically stayed there. I think the first design job I did for Native then between internship and being employed was designing the Beatport player. It was a special tractor version for Beatport.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2007 joined Native Instruments until 2018. And it was a long journey where all my previous knowledge, also studying a little bit about social systems, having already a little bit of a meta view on what creativity and creative processes are, that helped me really in this work because, terms like user experience design were not really on vogue, or user-centered design. That was more stuff, I brought my knowledge of semiotics, for example, the science of the science. How are science constructed in society through communication, stuff like that. I used to basically then observe how Native does design. The company had 100 people at this point, already quite some huge softwares. When Battery 3 came out, there was also Massive coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And a new version, I think FM8 was new, Absinthe was there, Traktor. There were all these huge monoliths, quite technical. And the design process was, back in the time, quite chaotic. Project managers doing wireframes and even putting bitmaps in. And when I joined Native, I basically observed all of this and thought, no, we can do this better, and proposed a design process that we refined over the years, and which led to the creation of over 200 instruments and over 20 hardwares in the time where I was there. Yeah.
Pretty impressive. Yeah. That's and you never, until recently when we, had a beer, I didn't know that you were actually one. I obviously knew because we talked for a long time, but you never actually said that you were, you were behind the process, that especially that Native Instruments is actually probably one of the greatest things is actually the design, right? And the user experience, how you interact with the products.
Yeah, I was super lucky because the leadership at Native with Daniel and Marte was always very design focused. So there was always the willingness to, invest and trust in design.
That's so cool.
And I think, Stefan Schmidt's Reaktor was such a great platform for people. It empowered musicians to create instruments. And it created, I think, a unique opportunity in time, being a facilitator of this process and the projects, where basically you would get great, instrument ideas by people like Lazyfish, Eric Wiegand, Tim Exile, coming with instrument that might have, 100 controls on the panel and creating amazing sounds. And then, an internal team of sound designers, UI designers, marketing, where we really from the get-go, when we got a first instrument idea, thought about what's the vision, how should it feel and sound when it's ready, creating, and having discussions about the aesthetics from the get-go, and then really in a structured process, boiling down the interface to something that, is expressive, has character, but is also usable, readable, and easy to understand.
And it shows. Listen, I mean, we already talked about it, and I know that you experimented with more centralized teams and more distributed teams where designers were part of this, like a small, let's say, I call it commando, so, like a small agile teams. And you mentioned like a structured process. So from, that experience and looking back, are you able to say that there is actually, probably not, but I mean, still worth asking, like a best practice, how to, also thinking about people that are coming to our meetup and, people who are sometimes listening, a lot of them say, hey, I'm actually about to build my first plugin, or I would like to build an instrument, etc. But I'm either more engineering, I have a background in engineering, so they look up for this kind of resources, to learn something, how they can be successful with their products. So I just wonder, as an experienced designer, would you be able to, share some tangible tips, so how to build the design process, and maybe also like at different stages, they should be different.
I mean, I think what is important tips are to really understand that, only that because something like design thinking has design in the title, it doesn't mean it's design. So being, design in a traditional sense is more, I would say, an art with constraints. Yeah. While an artist that goes into, let's say, painting will develop its own kind of path and constraints over time, and you can follow the oeuvre. I would say that a designer is looking really into more, I want to have a target audience that I reach. There's technical constraints, there is time constraints, etc. Maybe a price point to reach, especially important with, for example, a hardware, where you need to look at the bill of material. So in that sense, there's a difference between an artist and a designer. But, you can see who's a great designer. A great designer is also an artist. So it's not only about pure craftsmanship. It's also about taste and the inherent practice. Yeah. So I think that's very important to understand, to really, sharpen your eyes and your ears in regards to sound design. What's taste? What is really a direction? Whom am I working with? I think that's something that should have respect. And then on the other hand, I think it's more general tips that apply in general for teams building products. I think that in building a software or hardware instrument, all the disciplines are sharing the creativity. It's not like you take the designer and that's the creative part. No, I think that innovative, great products are the result of the creativity coming from all the disciplines, from the developer, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers.
So are you saying, let me understand if I, repeat if I understand you correctly. You're saying that it's not like a linear process where designers take part at some stage. It's more like a creative process that it's in the spirit of Bauhaus, that everybody just work together.
Yes. And
share this different perspective through entire product cycle.
Yes. I mean, really to make in native, I had the opportunity to work with great talents from all disciplines and to create the fastest and most effective process. It was all about front loading, how we call it. Basically having the team discuss from early on. Yeah. If you look, and it's rules that could apply to both waterfall process or an agile process. It's really about, talking to a designer, talking to a hardware architect, for example. Because these aforementioned constraints for the designer, they come also a lot from the knowledge of the other disciplines. And maybe there's a vision that you have for an innovative product where initially engineers will say it's not doable. But if you go together into brainstorming, and the more engineers have empathized in the past, the better it became to actually realize great ideas.
Yeah, I know that's become right now this popular term you heard, like discovery, right? So having like a common. I just read it today in the morning before we, were shooting the episode, that 80%. I just found it on LinkedIn through my, someone on my network mentioned that 80% of people do not engage engineers at the early stage of product development or concept, like a fuzzy front end, which is actually. Yeah, I'm not sure if you did experience this, but I think the same can go with designers, right? Somebody has an idea and then he sort of throws this at designers and engineers. And this is how can I right now unpack this? And and actually it's a little bit too late.
Yeah. And and you can also understand it to a degree, because when you work on something that's not created yet, there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. Things exist in your mind, you have a dream, but how do you express this dream without it being shot down? Yeah. Because, already, Dürer, the kind of prototype Renaissance artist, wrote into his book, everyone can be a great critic, but only very few can create. And this is still true after, 400 years. That basically, of course, in regards to also my focus at Native, the company grew in the time where I was there from 100 to 450 people. And my role shifted from, being the person that created the nitty-gritty hardware layout of a Machine 1 or Mark II to more thinking about how do we create a safe space or a creative atmosphere where people feel comfortable engaging, creating a language together, that allows a more fluent discussion about the ideas, that you can share, and people are not shooting down, but rather listen and contribute to your vision.
That's great. That's great. You see, I know the entire episode, when we discussed this, it was about culture, and it's great that we actually are able to connect the culture, which is actually has its value of its own, but also connected to something tangible in the business that to people who have certain doubts, you can say, hey, it translates also into, people that are open and are able to share their ideas, or they are not feeling attacked, because at least this happened to me as a product manager, that I took in my early stage of my career, criticism very personally, and which is crazy, because as a product manager, I should seek feedback, right? And I should be open, everybody who's, obviously not in an aggressive form, but actually providing me some feedback is actually great. And I should, actually not take it personally, but feel gratitude that somebody's actually willing, like we discussed, remember logo thing, right?
Yeah.
And I say, I may feel bad because I am attached to a certain idea emotionally, but that's great that somebody, gives you, there is actually this accumulated knowledge from these different perspectives, right? So having this culture, open culture, and a culture of, I would say, trust and safety, like the psychological safety, allow to people to flourish, right, and actually be open to share ideas.
Yeah, and I think there I'm really thankful for methods like design thinking, because also Google Design Sprints, for example, agile processes. And the practices that now revolve around user-centered design, user testing. I think user-centeredness is not only about I want to make it more likely that my product succeeds. I think what people should also understand is, in the moment where you have a team, disciplines coming together, discussing, you're often facing each other like this, and it might become also this. And the interesting thing is, in the moment where you start to seek feedback as a team, suddenly everyone looks in the same direction. I recently did a design workshop of 2 days where it was about, starting a discovery for a product. And we invited the first users on day 2. And you could say, oh, that's too early. That's a little bit rushed. But, having as early this view of the team, talking to someone about the idea, and it might be fuzzy, it really reprograms, it changes the whole mood and tone in a team.
I 100% agree. I even like this term co-creation, because I really love the idea building together with clients and treat them as partners. Well, it may be, of course, difficult because you don't want them completely to steer direction of your product, right? Probably. You still want to actually give it as a little bit of artistic flavor, so your own spirit into the product. But that's great that you can actually have people as early as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, user testing or co-creation doesn't mean design by committee. It means that, you have bring people together with a vision, with an idea. And I think that's the most valuable thing, but you can expose it to reality early on. So it will basically feedback and fuel, hopefully, the inspiration of the creators.
Yeah, I remember Moritz, the founder of Noiseworks, this, by the way, German company that I think I talked to like 3 episodes ago. He also mentioned that, we need to very clearly differentiate the asking people for ideas, and your clients are not to give you how to solve the problem. You can actually either at the early stage try to see what kind of problems they have. So by observing them, for example, in their natural environment, ethnographic, it's kind of research. And then the other one, as you say, exposing your idea and actually get some feedback at the early stage, right? So people can tell you, hey.
Yeah, I mean, that's in my career. Basically, I was at Native Instruments, steering the process. And already there was another element besides the cross-functional teams and, talking to users. I think one of the most crucial components was to realize it's all about decisions and decision making. Yeah. So how can you steer a process that you get the stakeholders on board, take decisions, communicate decisions, and, hold yourself to them, but also be able to question them if you get new insights. And I think that's also something that led me over the years from a pure design leader, becoming a product leader, because after Native, I worked on, basically moved on first into a design agency that worked with Volkswagen, Porsche, etc., looking at processes there, then to Elektron. And Elektron, I started as a chief product officer and was also for a year the interim CEO. And this was driven by the realization that in the end, if you want to create great products and you have ideas for great products, you not only need teams, but you need to, convince the sponsors, and you need to be able to have these decisions. Good products need to be realized to be good products, which means you need to talk to all stakeholders, and you, in the end, need to influence the budget planning of a company. I've seen in different places you can do as much, creative methods and explorations. If these findings don't reflect back into the budget plan of the next year, it will not happen.
I mean, once again, 100% with you. You see, my personal belief is that you are not product manager unless you have a budget accountability. So if you don't own P&L, to be right simple, and I'm always advocating organization. Well, it's obviously pretty challenging. I watched recently an interview with founder of Airbnb. I'm not sure if you heard this discussion about the founder modes. Founder mode, there was actually something in the Silicon Valley community that, everybody was bragging about. He simply like a centralized company again at certain point, and people were criticizing him because, he saw the company become very bureaucratic and very slow. But since he was very he was like a very down-to-earth founder. So, he still was actually very close to the market, very close to the product. So he wanted to manage it more like a startup that he simply have like a, functions, design, engineering, etc. And he was like a, let's say, lead product manager, so to speak. But, he was actually explaining in their interview. And obviously, I know it's Silicon Valley, it sucks. It's not necessarily like this value of those companies that I admire. But I mean, I still, watch because there are some great tips on management. And especially that everybody was just it was such a controversial thesis. And actually, to me, it was crazy that a founder had to apologize that he's actually taking control over his own company, right? And especially that people are saying about this decentralization, you have to delegate, to people. But then when I listened to this interview, it was on the Lenin's podcast, this podcast about product management, that he said, well, I'm still very connected to the market and actually there were Apple people Apple designers that came to Airbnb, and that's why, he was influenced by this idea that companies should be managed as a startup, so not too bureaucratic. And he says, it's not true that we are firing product managers. We actually have fewer product managers, but product managers that are truly business people. So they own P&L and they make business decisions. They're also connected to marketing, so they realized vision of the, like you mentioned, right? About Elektron, that you just cannot be like a backlog manager, something that just pushes tickets and organizing workshops, but through executor or like a strategist and executor, right? You have an idea, you convince stakeholders, you make a budget plan, right? You can plan ROI and everything, etc. And you have to be financially literate to do that.
I can't really comment on this Airbnb situation because, there can be so many reasons why, let's say, a senior owner steps in and thinks he needs to change the business. It sounded a little bit like an intervention.
He felt like company was too bureaucratic, but I didn't provide full context. He says people were bragging that he's firing and this end of product management because he's firing product managers. And when you actually listen to the interview, he was actually saying exactly what you were saying, that it's not about intervention that I want to fire people, etc. He says, I want to have actually, instead of having, dozens of product owners, product managers, I want to have product managers who can, who can create a bill of materials, who can, plan budget and, they actually know how to execute the product vision, rather than just being, Jira admin.
And I think, that it's interesting. I think you need what is very important. You need the senior buy-in. If you want to distribute decision making, if you want to distribute real, budget responsibility, it means that the top management needs to share information and make sure this information is shared and available to people, and also needs to be very clear where they give away decision power. You mentioned the safe space earlier, right? So I think in regards to building a product strategy, a release strategy, also there you need, that's the freedom you create and the safe space you create where you say, this is a budget that you have full control over.
Absolutely.
And I would like to talk about, you could say this is risky but I think we are having a big risk if we are not transparent. If we're not transparent and if we have centralized resources, the problem is what happens is that basically managers start to build inner politics, right? It's like, I need to be in this meeting. I need to have a good show off so I can kind of fight for my resources. And suddenly you have a lot of focus that goes internally instead of using the same time and resources to look outwards. What's actually happening in the market? How do we need to steer our teams to be successful in the market? And instead, you're starting to fight for internal resources. And that, of course, I think it's a natural move. I think, organizations need structure, and you need to invest into the structure of an organization and its communication. But on the other hand, you need to make sure that you don't get too internally focused, so to say.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a bit sad because I can see, despite the fact we're talking about trust and transparency, and I can see unfortunately that I'm not specifically talking about music technology, and I think it's a bit different, and that's why I also feel so much at home. But unfortunately, big business attracts certain type of people, like a bit, I would say, sociopathic, and it's very often that, those values become only on paper because, Yeah, I mean, so many companies, even Apple, people say it's you can admire for great products and great design, etc. But people, say Steve Jobs wasn't very easy to work with, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those companies are really still very centralized, or I just wonder how is actually with my experience so far with music industry that I haven't met people like this, and it's actually driven by passion and openness, and actually like a willingness to great, like you mentioned in the beginning, right? Such a great passion for solving, or not maybe solving problems, but giving people creative tools, so that's.
I mean, in the end, that's a little bit, what I learned through studying, also a little bit outside of my field. Mm-hmm. I think it helped me to gave me a toolkit to observe the social dynamics. And I think that's something in my philosophy of leadership is very important, that, we are all individuals, and then the individuals engage into a team. Yeah. So, you give a part of you into the team, but then the teams have also their own dynamics. Mm-hmm. And so that on the one hand, I want to have a bold ideas where individuals come forward and say, look, I dreamed this up. I think that's super valuable. I also think that we need strong leadership in the sense of that there are people that are feeling, taking the weight of going forward, taking a decision, communicating a decision. So in that sense, I think you need individuals that step forward. But on the other hand, I think you should never forget that everything we see, and also a lot of the individual actions, is a result of the social system we're working in. And I mean, going back, to growing up in Berlin, studying here, doing parties, one thing that I realized is, Berlin created this playground of a lot of clubs, a lot of, easy available space, a lot of talent, where it was for a long time very easy to collaborate. You didn't need much money, and people had time. And I think this creative and technological playground was something where companies like Native and Ableton basically profited off from. And I think what's interesting about this subculture or underground culture, how we call it, it's all decentralized. It's individuals meeting each other because they click, they have a sympathy, they share a taste in music, and that makes a decision. Let's do something together. Next month, we organize an event. And suddenly you're in all, where you can apply all kinds of processes. I'm also teaching sometimes audio designers in creative strategies and project management. When I ask, what's a project you've managed? Often it comes up, it was my shared flat. We organized a party, or I have a light collective doing festivals. And what's interesting for me is that there's a lot of, in subculture, a lot of, decision making, innovation happening, organization happening, and it's all decentralized. What you call a scene. There's a scene. Everyone is kind of observing what the others are doing, and you're leveling up together. And you can see, if you look at, Berlin Techno, that it can create something very powerful that has a global outreach and inspiration for generations. And that's something, what I've seen in a company like Native, all these creatives joining with their passion. I think, being in a company, be aware of this talent, and also be aware of these communication and processes that maybe are not completely tied to a plan. I think if you can create dynamics, natural dynamics. Look at the dynamics, allow people to share knowledge, to create experiences together, hack days, let them pitch ideas and work on them for a while. And not for the sake of creating the next product, but to create this certain mindset. Because I think this is very tied to these things that we would call a safe space. It means developing a shared language, developing shared values, and feeling comfortable coming forward with something that is chaotic, that you can't completely explain yet. But, you're like, no, I can share this, and people will not just...
Yeah, I got it. I totally got it. But listen, you already touched the point that I wanted to ask, about the Berlin subculture, or generally like the specific conditions. And we actually remember we talked about this, when we organized the first meetup, and we went for lunch, and you told me the story that actually that was this very specific conditions. So pretty, cheap, yet like a life in Berlin, right? Generally, it was not that, like a living wasn't that expensive like nowadays. And obviously like a music scene that actually helped to, or like a made possible to form companies like Native Instruments, Ableton, and others. And do you think it's still here? I mean, of course, the city has specific vibe, but I understand the other hand, it's got pretty expensive, right? And it's not that easy to live. And yeah, well,
I mean, the city is constantly going through transitions. And, I've seen kind of new scenes evolve and then collapse over many times, I would say what was very special in the 90s and early 2000s is that the center wasn't occupied. So basically, you had a bar that didn't have a name, just was named after it's Open Tuesday. So it's a Tuesday bar, and then you would go to the Wednesday bar. And you can see that, if you look at architect offices like Kinzo, so they were architecture students, but also run a bar. And then they focused on creating buildings that have a sound focus. And I think, that's this kind of, we talk nowadays about patchwork careers as a novelty in regards to people, can't stay that long in jobs. The interesting thing is that in Berlin, people started patchwork from the start. So we are not just studying, you were also running maybe an event, and you were doing your own artistic expression, and people could do that and had the time to do so. And of course, when the financial pressure gets higher, when space as a resource is not as available, it gets harder to realize such a, broad, holistic expression or lifestyle. And in that sense, of course, Berlin is changing. I would say that companies were successfully built. Also, some companies got now bought after people saw distraction. Of course, my question is to the new owners, are they interested in further nourishing this creative spirit, providing resources to the next generation of instrument builders in our concrete case, or do they see what was created only as a commodity that should be exploited for financial gain? I think that's an interesting question. What are you in for in this?
Listen, I just realized when you talked about the, 80s, 90s, early, 90s, and actually transformation from communism to, to, let's say, free market, economy. I just realized that, my town, of course, not being as big as Berlin, because Berlin is like an epicenter. But Katowice, Silesia, it's actually also like a former industrial region. And I also lived in this, 91, it was like this moment when Poland, started going from the 89 and 91 first free elections. So I also experienced a very similar thing. And I just realized that we did parties, organized parties. We could actually make a techno party in, former factory or some energy plant. It was so much, it was not occupied, and it was so cheap. And there was so much creative energy that, there were people just, like you say, coming and such a creative, energy at the time.
Yeah,
it's still there. It's, I think it's also transforming similarly, like Berlin. I think, Poland, in my town, in Poland, it's actually only one. It is not that real estate didn't completely went crazy, so you can still live in the city center and even organize some parties and put together a club. But in other parts of the country, things were completely crazy. It's just you need to have millions euros in order to put anything together. So it's,
I mean, it's interesting. We're sitting here in this building, which was the first movie factory of Germany. So, it was the first, factory where, on an industrial scale, movies were developed and cut. And it's great. Now we have here the 42 coding school where people can learn, coding for free. And we have workers, co-working, where I have also my office, but we also have a small office, of Elektron in here. We have Oliver Greschke of Mum Instruments doing iOS apps. We have other developers doing audio software here. So I think it's still possible to create these spaces. We are now, tonight we'll run the physical meetup where we have great speakers also, coming from Neumann, for example. And there's definitely actors that are, in the professional industry and are very sensitive to this culture thing and try also to build culture. I'm working with Nadia Sess. She's running Your Mom's Agency and is a great facilitator, manager to create events that kind of connect industry to schools, to artists, where you don't feel it's window dressing, but it's an actual event and space created for real exchange. Schneider's Laden is around the corner. Schneider's Laden is hosting now regular beginner workshops for modular or smaller manufacturers
And Fab Lab, of course, down there.
Yeah, we have a Fab Lab downstairs where you can print, cut, and solder products, and where there's also workshops for people to learn, for example, PCB layouting. In that sense, I would say if you would compare Berlin from now to 25 years ago, I would say overall the city is more professionalized. In that sense, I think there's also, if you're looking after it, there are more resources available in regards to knowledge. These kind of fab places were not that common 25 years ago. But of course, on the other hand, rent is way up, or basically no way to find a flat in the moment in the town. I mean, that's the big issue in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like everywhere. Yeah, everywhere in where the culture is great. That's what's happening. Listen, I mean, I wanted to say one thing, that the links to Workish website and other links that you, the resources that you mentioned will be posted in the link to the video and podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you actually listen, so you can actually get and find for yourself. If you are in Berlin, feel free to join, especially that, Workish actually is hosting our meetups. Not only Gösta works here, but it's weird. So
every Wednesday we also have a Synth Lab where you can come and build a DIY kit you bought, or if you have an instrument idea, you can share it with the people and get some tips how to realize your hardware or software project. Yeah.
Cool. Gösta, can I ask you a little bit yet about your Elektron experience? And that's actually very specific because it's actually a hardware company, so, is there like any tips or, what learnings you'd like to share about, your CPO and for time also CEO. So it's kind of like it's a great responsibility, so probably you have a lot of learnings and thoughts and for people who build hardware especially.
Yeah, I love hardware. I mean, I'm myself as a musician, I'm mostly a live musician using hardware, also using a lot of software tools, but mostly I would say sound generation as hardware. And at Native we build stuff, from Maschine to keyboards to DJ controllers, sound cards. And there the process was often that we engineered something and then it was manufactured mostly in China, which was quite interesting. I think over a course of 10 years, basically here in Berlin, the team, we learned how to build hardware, but at the same time also visiting Chinese factories. We improved. Also, the Chinese teams learned from us. Basically, the whole collaboration and communication flourished from both sides. Coming to Elektron, what was special that also there was an in-house engineering team, but basically big part of the products was even produced like next door, which was pretty impressive. So you could literally walk over to the assembly line, and we had the warehouse there. So hardware was really, really close. And of course, in regards to Elektron, there was a difference in how the products were made, because they are not basically USB controllers as most native products besides the Machine Studio, but they are actually using, hardware chips to calculate the sound, and are using analog components. So building there, for example, the Syntact, that is basically one of the instruments I initiated and built with the team. That was a great experience. We were able to use a new just released stereo filter, for example, for the effects track. And overall, we built the unit has 2 PCBs, and 1 PCB is just for the analog components, for the analog voices. It has over 2,500 components on this size, which is a challenge in itself. And working with a very, very dedicated team in Gothenburg on creating, on the one hand, a very expressive sounding device, but also a highly controllable device. At the same time, everything is, digitally controlled, every analog parameter. That's basically also a sound card at the same time, remote controllable, and super reliable at the same time. Yeah, it's amazing. Long-time Elektron user, having been able to work with this team on products and strategy, up to also now, ideas that are in the Tonwerk that was recently released. Yeah, super amazing experience.
But listen, if I can follow up on this a little bit, because it's like a unique experience, so what are things, let's take an example. We go to Super Booth, we talk to hardware. As a product guy, I very often talk to people with this, like a product bias, so ask them, did you consider certifications already? Did you think about the distribution, how to distribute hardware? It's completely different, right? And, and very often I can see people have no slightest idea yet, which is, I'm not criticizing. I know that passion comes first and only later professional processes, etc. But I can imagine that lack of, awareness of certain risks or issues. By the way, this is actually the subject also of today's meetup. We'll talk a little bit about it later. But it can kill this hardware startup. So software is a little bit easier to adjust, more forgiving, I would say. You can always adjust. Once shipped, the product is more or less there, right? And obviously like a cost. And nowadays with the issues with the supply chains, right? It could be challenging, So what would you recommend, if you were just like an advisor to hardware startup, what would you say? What should we look at?
Hardware is hard. Hardware is hard. And you already mentioned a couple of topics that are important. I think, first of all, don't be scared. Just have respect for creating hardware. And, try to find people, that have experience when you don't have the experience. Even more it's important if you don't want to get stuck or delay a project into infinity, it's even more important to be aware about your knowledge, and non-knowledge, and get the right people on board. I think that, overall, a lot of design principles, for, software design are true for hardware as well. Some people think, hardware is completely different. It's all waterfall. I disagree. I think, testing the value proposition, understanding workflows, understanding, creating prototypes, getting early feedback, super crucial. Of course, what comes on top is understanding margins, bill of materials, supply chains, respecting time frames. Yeah. How often do I see an ambitious product leader that's like, I do my first hardware and I want it in amount of time X. Yeah. And you need to respect that hardware has its own time frames. Overall, I think we live in a great time to create hardware from this prototyping perspective. I think it's easier than ever to prototype ideas. And it's even easier than ever also to go to professional manufacturers, be it in Europe, be it in China, that have teams that actually can understand your product idea and can give you good advice. Yeah. So I think it's much easier than a couple years ago to basically come with an idea and then have a really constructive back and forth. And get something that hits a price point, hits a timeline, and is actual functional from a firmware perspective.
Okay, Gösta, you mentioned, I ask all these questions about hardware because I remember, again, it was, when having beer, one of those beers, you mentioned like a cash flow is the king, right?
Yes.
When talking about hardware, so
yes.
Could you elaborate on this one a little bit?
I mean, that's really a trap. When you build a hardware, you need to buy the components. Yeah, you need to finance, of course, any R&D, etc. Then you need to market the products, ship the products. So you need to buy them yourselves, right? And then it takes, 3-4 months until some money comes back. And, you need to calculate, you might need to buy components up front so that you have them actually available for the production, right? When the supply chain crisis started, a lot of smaller manufacturers just died because they couldn't get a hold of certain components, or certain key components suddenly costed 6,000% more than before, right? So, making sure that you have the parts to build your product, making sure that you can buy your own product from the factory, ship it, and then have the stamina to also, get some money back.
Yeah.
And I think, that's something that of course is different from software.
But I also think distribution, right? It's so important that actually, I don't think, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that most of the hardware is actually sold through distributors like, Sweetwater or Thomann. Yeah. Or, you rarely, sell hardware directly or in large quantities. Then you would need to actually have your own warehouse and logistics, etc. Where actually software can be sold off the website straight. If you actually have good digital marketing and funnels, you can actually, cost of shipping is so inexpensive, right? So having, I know you mentioned this, right? But I'm trying to unpack it also for listeners. That makes your margin completely different, right? Because except for a cost of production, you have cost of distribution. Distributors take certain, percentage, of course. And then if you have, some retailers, local shops, etc., then they take their own piece as well, so having actually understanding all this.
That's something, definitely, you have this podcast platform. If there are people interested in learning more about this, maybe we can make a, dedicated workshop around this whole topic, because it doesn't fit into an hour. Yeah. But to mention or one point to what you're touching here is, one of the big enemies of a good product design is feature creep. Yeah. You start with a concept. Yeah. You work on the concept, and while working on it, you're like, oh, actually, I found this cool thing. There's a great idea. We could include it. And sometimes that works, sometimes it overloads your software. Even worse is feature creep in hardware products. Yeah, if you're like, okay, I have this product idea, it should cost this much to fit into the market bracket. And I mean, that's something really to respect, because if you're out of the bracket, you will sell much less, for sure. But then you're like, the product should reach a certain quality. So it needs to have certain components.
More complexity, more like risks.
So there is a risk that you are basically lying to yourself in regards to the margins, where you're like, okay, let's go a little bit higher in the bill of material, and then we will sell more product because it's so much better. But if you don't make sure that everyone gets its cut, you pay to the factory, you pay to the distributor, you pay to the retailers, and then you need to have money for yourself. And that doesn't mean only money to sustain your business. It means, service the product. Yeah, provide support, manage the life cycle of a product, finance extra R&D for your next product. So if you basically feature creep in the bill of material, that can very easily kill your company, actually. Yeah, because you might release a product that costs you money, that does make you money, but in the end, you have more cost than.
I can see that. And you know what? I saw that, at least I have more experience with software. And I often see, especially with startups, that people have this feeling, instead of actually having perfect market fit with this one feature that was the original idea, they have certain, I think, misplaced belief that if they have more features, they will actually have higher chance of succeeding. And it's actually like a startup killer, as I heard, right? So okay, I don't want to blast the company online, in the podcast, but actually I have experience, at least recently, with the product, which actually their core feature doesn't reliably work, so they just increase the price, I think, 100%. They just put so many new features, which some are actually pretty cool. But you see, you bought a product for a specific reason, and I just simply say, hey, I need this bloody thing to work, Of course, all other things are, like in this Kano model, so like a nice features that are like exciters, so to speak. But I still need the core feature, to work, right? And not only this like increase the cost, but it makes you distracted and especially that probably everybody most people, when they just build a product, they solve certain problem or have certain goal in mind that product should do, right? And then when you get distracted, you can't even get to the point where your product simply doesn't deliver on promise, right? But
it's important to understand that distraction is the normal mode. That's, because distraction means we are navigating the complexity of any project and any product development that you, of course, want to develop for someone. In the beginning, you always know nothing. And in the end, you're like, oh yeah, if I should have known this before. So distraction and not knowing is the normal mode, right? Everything we're talking about is not judging that you're distracted. That's true. Fine, because it means that you're active and that you're working on something. What we're discussing is, best practices, how to deal with the distraction. Yeah,
exactly. And how to actually manage the risk as well, right? So
yes,
So and that's why actually we're just getting to the very interesting promotional side, which is actually, I know that the episode is aired when the meetup was already, hosted, but that's why I'm so happy that today's meetup is actually about launching products and go-to-market risks, because this is, exactly what we're talking about. It's not only not judging people, but actually equipping people with tools, or actually creating certain space, where people can learn from each other and actually share issues that they had, and, I killed the startup, so I very well know what it is actually to spend a lot of money on and having scope creep, etc. So
same.
So I think that's actually a great topic that we chose for a meetup. So obviously the link to the meetup, although already hosted, is there, but I'm sure we'll do more than that, right? It's only second edition.
Yeah, and in the end, what I think is, one last thing maybe as a tip is, there's plenty of great ideas. What matters is the execution. Yeah. Get the ideas out into the world. And honestly, the early prototyping, early discussion, getting feedback, early observations, how does it fit in? These are things that can really help you to take certain decisions early on when you're not that invested yet.
Absolutely, 100%.
So even, I'm working as a consultant. Yeah. So you can book me as a product designer, but you can also work with me as a coach. And it might happen, that we go through certain stages to find out more about your idea and vision. And maybe you find out, okay, maybe I need to pivot in a direction. Yeah. And for me, that would be a good thing that, you take decisions, take a hypothesis, look how you can test your hypothesis, learn from it, and then you go further.
Absolutely. By the way, link to Gösta's profile is in the description, and you can also meet him on our Discord, he's active there, so you can actually ping him directly if you like to get some help from him or like his experience, right?
Yes. Yeah. Always curious.
Perfect.
I mean, that's also why we do the this meetup here. I mean, that's very dear to me. Basically, level up the community, and learn from each other as well.
Absolutely. Listen, I want to maybe wrap up by touch this topic of culture again, or we started from culture and, sort of wrap it, because you mentioned something that touched me deeply, 2 days ago when we were having a beer, or even earlier, I don't remember. We are having so many conversations, that culture is important. It's just a value of its own. So that's why, maybe, if I don't want to speak for, on your behalf, if you can, what I'm trying to say, that the idea that companies should give back to, invest into community, not just because it's good for business, for their brand, etc., but a little bit about this, tissue, social tissue.
Yeah, I think what is very important for our space, where we create tools for creatives. Yeah, so I think it's so important to contribute, and be it just by being there and listening, but if you have resources, also by contributing resources, that the actual cultural scene can flourish. And that can mean many things. It can mean that you create a space in your company. If you're a larger company, is there a room where there are instruments, where people can meet and actually play the instruments? Do you invite artists and listen to them, what their reasoning is behind their art? Do you create formats where people can learn or get resources? I think there's many ways where companies in our space can, with I think very little financial investment, but with a mental and time investment, can really help to keep a scene alive and growing, but also make it part of their culture. Yeah, because there is, when we talk about, we started talking about the design process, we started to talk about creating a hardware and how hard it is. So if you go onto the train to create a product, it's all about, also creating structure, taking decisions, holding to a plan. But the people engaging in the process and the people you're working for have all these also, more fluent, ephemeral processes. And I think these processes are as important as the structured processes.
I got it. And I would even say that you mentioned that execution is so important. And actually I would encourage everybody actually to say that not to be afraid and simply give it a try. Even if you fail, it's just, life is actually about experience. It's not about achieving goals. I personally believe, at least. But it's obviously, on the other hand, it's a bit risky because you're risking financially, etc. And if there is actually this tissue, the culture is actually easier. Because if there's just like a lot of companies,
I mean, to jump in there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at health, like medical health, mm-hmm. There's a lot of studies that show you if you are well connected, if you have many friends and family around, mm-hmm. you will just live longer. And honestly, I think the same is true for the social, social context and the social bodies that organizations are. Mm-hmm. If an organization is connected and allows fluidity and connection, I think that also the companies will flourish. And, you mentioned Silicon Valley before. Where is Silicon Valley coming from? I guess it also at some point was a strong, exchange and a hub. Yeah.
You see, exactly. I even read that, you see, people are not afraid of starting companies there because there are so many companies there that if you fail, you are already so much respected for trying that somebody will hire you and you will never actually have financial trouble, right? And that's what I want actually to, again, with certain disclaimer that I'm not necessarily big fan of this, I want to make money for money's sake and, grow super huge, big. And to me, it's actually right now the biggest parasite on this planet, honestly, in my opinion. All this like a corporate growth for the corporate growth. But I mean, not to throw the baby with the bathwater. I'm just trying to say that, we can take certain practices or certain observe. And I think Berlin is eminent that, if start company, if you fail, you will still be respected. There are so many businesses, somebody will hire you, even so much experience and learning that you will be able to work like a consultant, freelancer. Maybe another time maybe you will meet people that will help. It's just, what I'm exactly trying to say is just not to be afraid or like encourage our listeners, to not to, if they think about the product, simply do it, right? I mean, of course, it's great to look up for some resources and meet, in the meetups like ours, or a lot of other,
I mean, fostering entrepreneurial spirit, but also intrapreneurial spirit. Yeah. Basically, also people being in companies, you're not defined by the company you're working for, but you are individual contributing to the company. I think that's important.
Yes,
maybe also to say, and ask, fight for internal freedom in discourse, and look for these opportunities. I think, I'm a big advocate for shared creativity and community. Ideas that come from this exchange and from conversations and from shared experiences, be it that showing stuff to each other or.
Perfect ending. Listen, I already told you, but this idea that we started together, is so attractive to people that there are some friends, by the way, one of them being former Ableton employee, some friends also in Barcelona, they're saying, hey, this idea of a audio product management or design marketing meetup, it's so attractive that we should actually do something, something similar in our city. So it was such a cool point. And also, if I could, at the very end also, give a shout out to the sponsor of the meetup in the evening, so a company called Piebox, and Ivan friend from Barcelona who helped us by simply sponsoring pizza and venues, so we can actually, so I could come over from Katowice here and stay for a week and actually meet so many people and. Gösta, listen, it's always pleasure to talk to you, and we have to actually finish the episode. We have to get started prepping, right, for the evening,
Thank you for the conversation. It's a long history and a lot of things to touch. I hope the viewers and listeners found it interesting, and I'm always happy to continue
hardware.
And if you're planning to build a product, be it the software or be the hardware, hit me up, and we can talk about it.
Absolutely, and we need to talk about hardware. We need to take it offline. I don't want you to commit live on the pod. I don't want to put you on the spot. But I mean, I'm also like a super interested in hardware. I think a lot of people, actually, just to, like I mentioned, that Super Booth is probably like for you, probably one of my best shows that I love, going to. And I often like not interview, just go and check out, great products I meet. I mean, I see, and I always like I see how, Jesus, I wish I could help this, not even that I want to make money off them, but I simply say, I wish these people, have known certain things, just give advice, hey guys, remember about the certification, like look up your, your margin, your margins, because the product is so cool that, so I'm not sure what I wanted to say actually. Yeah, but in hardware, yes. So we actually, the hardware.
We come back to the topic.
The hardware topic, yeah.
If there's an interest, comment,
exactly.
Write Wojtek or ping me. And if there's an interest in this topic, then we can.
Perfect.
We can maybe find a different structure. That's definitely something we discussed already last time. There's so much things that are not written in a book yet, right? There's so much experience, and often projects, even if they're small, have such a complexity to them that it really makes sense, to have a conversation around it, to bring it out. And I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for to see the next generation of instruments coming out that try new things, that are bold, not shying away from, the current prompting trend, but, developing actually instruments that allow you to connect to an audience, to perform also music, and something that you just like to spend time with, and that you have the feeling you can find and define your own voice with. Yeah, that's the stuff that I'm always looking for, and that's why I'm so many years in this industry.
I already said that. That's a great ending, but yeah, I know what you mean. Listen, again, thank you so much. And thank you to the listeners.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and of course on our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to it and hit the bell, because we publish a lot of interesting videos there, not just the episodes. You can also become a supporter and get premium content like additional reading, unpublished videos on our Buy Me a Coffee page, linked in the description of this episode. See you in the next one. Yo.